Hey everyone, it's Bruce here from WaterBear, broadcasting from Small Pond Studio, and today I'm talking about a subject that's very close to my heart, which is finding vintage gear, sourcing it and using it, because generally it can sound really cool and it can have a lot of character if you're prepared to put the research in and the time in to find it, and of course to keep it going, because it's like a classic car or something, it needs a bit of love. We're going to be looking in the usual places. We're going to be looking, trawling through eBay, in lots of countries, not just the UK, because actually it's not that big a deal to import stuff. We're going to be looking on reverb.com, and we're also going to be just keeping our eye out for the musicians community, word of mouth and stuff like Facebook, because it's amazing what crops up through the music community. Now I think the key thing, we're also looking for a bargain here. We don't want to be spending loads of money. My advice is to steer away from, if you really want to play, and this is about the music rather than hanging this stuff on the wall, I'd steer away from anything that's supremely collectible, like an early Strat or, you know, an early 60s Les Paul Standard or something like that. You're just going to be paying too much money for the mystique around the instrument. So I've got some tips for you. Early 70s and mid 70s instruments, in fact all the way up to 1983, there's a golden period in my view for guitar manufacture. So very happy with a lot of instruments from that era. They won't all be great, but a lot of them will be. And in Japan, culturally, there's not a real big level of enthusiasm for second-hand gear. So if you type MIJ into your searches on YouTube, for example, or Reverb, that stands for Made in Japan, and you'll see a lot of people in Japan selling second-hand vintage guitars very, very cheaply. You will have to factor in 60-70 quid for a guitar, for example, on postage, and you'll have to factor in a little bit of import duty. I think it's about 10%. But even so, there's some Japanese brands like Greco, for example, that make incredible instruments, and you can get them for an absolute steal. So we know if we go off the beaten track a little bit, if we do our research, we can turn up some very interesting pieces. And this is an example. So on first glance, this looks like a early 80s Marshall JCM 800, which is in itself a classic amp. You'd normally expect us to pay maybe 1300 for a good example of a 50-watt head, for example. However, this one is something a little bit different I've been searching for 10 years, and not only have I found it finally, I've got it very, very cheap. It was about £650 on eBay. This amp didn't sell because it's unusual, because it hasn't got a master volume, so it's perfect for what I do. It's more of a vintage circuit. It's got 4 inputs, very, very few of these made in this format. So not only is it perfect for me, not only is it an amazing amp, and I've only paid 650 quid for it, but it's quite rare and it's got its own very unique character as well. So other things you might want to look at is, instead of looking at Gibson, maybe look at Guild, maybe look at the Japanese copies like Greco, look at Italian guitar manufacturers, or Swedish, Hagstrom, for example, Dwight, you know. So look for stuff that's just a little bit off the track, and you'll find some incredible, interesting body shapes. It looks good in video, and also you'll just get away from that classic Les Paul Marshall Telecaster kind of usual sound. There you go. There's some top tips. Hope that's helpful.